Player-driven stories that emerge organically are more impactful and stronger than spoon-fed narratives. In this video, I'll be talking about Valheim as a case study for dynamic mechanics that feature the player-driven narrative, while the background narrative remains only to contextualize the player's journey as a Viking in a mythical Viking world. I'm going to explain the primary delivery methods that sprinkle in all the aspects of Viking glory as a fantastic canvas upon which the player's journey will be allowed to unfold, and I'm also going to explain the mechanics that facilitate player engagement with the world in a dynamic way, and demonstrate how that engagement feeds into the experience, leading to emerging stories which are driven by the player. Also, before I begin, I want to explain that I can only speak from my perspective, and I'm the type of player that enjoys survival games for their methodical nature, so feel free to disagree with me if you play differently. And in my case, I played the game in multiplayer with friends, which allowed us to diversify and fill different roles in game, so a huge aspect of the stories that unfolded for me are related to the fact that they were shared moments in game with a bunch of friends. So most of my arguments are rooted in that fact, but don't get me wrong, the solo experience is still deeply immersive and impactful. Primarily, Valheim is contextualized by a paragraph of text when you load in your first world. It explains that Odin has banished some creatures to this world, but after some time, he heard that they were growing in strength. So it's implied that your job is to put an end to his enemies. The player character is a fallen warrior carried here by one of Odin's two ravens, and after dropping you off, the raven sticks around to point you in the right direction and to let you know that you're here to defeat the Forsaken, which are bosses represented by the statues that spawn. After that, the raven will hang around for a bit to explain the mechanics to you, but not too much more lore. The other delivery method for lore is going to be the runestones, of which there are 43 scattered around the massive game world. Sets of these runestones correspond to the biomes, and they vary widely. Some explain the backgrounds of creatures in the biome, some offer insights into the origins of the world, and others suggest that there were other warriors here before you who left behind wisdom to help guide you. Most of these runestones contain embedded information related to the survival mechanics, like this boar runestone here, which alludes to the taming mechanic but doesn't overtly tell you how to tame a boar. Besides the runestones, there are a few noteworthy Easter eggs, like how sometimes you can see Odin watching over you from a distance, or during a thunderstorm you can see Thor riding his chariot across the sky with lightning coming out. But now let's get into the meat of the argument, which is the dynamic mechanics that I'm going to explain. The three mechanics that contribute the most to emergent player-driven narratives are going to be character development through gameplay, hearth, home, and health, and base raids. When I say character development through gameplay, what I'm really getting at is skill customization. And in Valheim, skills are leveled up by doing the very thing you want to level up. If you chop trees, it increases your woodcutting skill. If you kill enemies with a club, it increases your club skill. Wow, what a crazy idea. It's a very simple and straightforward way to allow for player expression to manifest in a certain playstyle, particularly because it's unlikely that you're going to max out all of your skills in a single playthrough. In fact, the only skill I ever maxed out was running, but not from running away, mind you. I've always been fond of swords in popular culture, so any game I play I usually go with a sword as my main weapon, and Valheim was no exception, so I already knew I was going to be a swordsman. Others may gravitate towards bows, axes, maces, maybe a spear, or even a knife. It's up to the individual, but it will have an impact on your playstyle in two ways. First way is that these weapons all have distinct movesets and capabilities. Two-handed weapons are better at dealing with groups of enemies, they have a wider AoE. Knives, on the other hand, are much shorter and they have the highest sneak attack bonus. The other way is that enemies have distinct weaknesses to certain damage types. Skeletons are weak to blunt and trolls are weak to pierce. So what all this means is that the player's skill levels and the enemies that you plan on taking on are very important to consider when gearing up for your next battle or your next adventure. Will you be the courageous hero who faces any challenge without backing down until the bitter end or a glorious victory? Or will you be a cowardly stealth archer who relies upon sneak attacks? Either way, your skill in the game's combat system will be a big factor in what kind of role you can play. But the other big factor of what you're capable of in that life or death situation is your health and stamina. And you may be thinking, obviously having more health and more stamina is better than having less. So what you're saying is I should level up my health and my stamina stat. Well, yes and no. You cannot level up your max health and stamina stat because your max health and stamina stat will always correspond to the complexity of food that you consume. And as you progress through the game, you will have access to more ingredients and more advanced preparation tools, which in turn will give you access to more complex food. So any Viking worth his or her salt needs a hearty meal before a great battle, and stocking up on supplies may mean the difference between life and death if you get raided by strong enemies. You're going to want to keep your character nice and full if you want to stay safe out there, because as your food wears off, your max health and stamina will go back down again until you have the minimal 25 health and 3 stamina bars. Besides food, you're going to want to keep your character well rested by sitting at a fire. Doing so will give you the rest buff, which doubles stamina regeneration and multiplies both health regen and experience gain by 50%. If you're wondering how much of a difference that makes in combat, I'll explain it this way. In Valheim, everything you do from swinging a sword to planting crops takes stamina. The combat system is comparable to Dark Souls with an iframe dodging mechanic, strong and fast attack variations, and even a parrying mechanic, all of which requires stamina. If you run out of stamina, you are confined to a slow pace until you recover enough to act. And there are plenty of moments when I'm right out of stamina, there's an incoming attack and I just barely recover enough in time to roll or leap out of the way. All that to say, any Dark Souls player will understand that doubling stamina regeneration is an insanely powerful buff, because when you're running, jumping, and fighting, that stamina bar is your limiting factor for what you can literally do. One awesome feature is that as you upgrade your base by crafting furniture and decor, your comfort level increases while you're resting in the base, and that resting buff that you get from resting will last up to 20 minutes. Which means that players with a knack for interior design or those who like to chef it up in the kitchen will be rewarded greatly by these mechanics. The third and final mechanic I'm going to explain before I tie this all together are base raids.
Moving. We're under attack. Yeah, we're under attack.
Hold the line!
Hold the line! Oh my god!
After your first 9 days in Valheim, your base will be eligible for raids by hordes of enemies that can kill you and destroy your buildings. Any area with a bed, a campfire, and a workbench qualifies as a base, and there are 5 types of raids that correspond with the 5 different biomes. You will be able to get these types of raids until you've killed the boss for that respective biome, and additionally there are 5 types of raids that happen when you've been killing a lot of a specific enemy, though it doesn't always necessarily depend on your progress in the game and is clearly influenced by the player's actions. The raid type will be indicated by ominous text that appears on the screen, such as, "The forest is moving," means that a horde of grey dwarves is coming. "A cool wind blows from the mountains," indicates that you'll be bombarded by drakes from the sky. And "the ground is shaking," means that a pair of trolls are coming to start smashing in your walls. The variety of raids that can occur make it important to consider security and prepare defensive structures such as walls, moats, and gatehouses in a surprisingly realistic manner. Now that you have a decent understanding of some of the mechanics in the game, I'm going to tie this all together and try to express the depth of the impact that they have on the player-driven narrative and how important that narrative is. These mechanics force the player to embrace the journey. They hold you accountable in a way that is so internally consistent that it imitates the impactfulness of real life. The limited inventory space, the dependence on food, the diversity of ways to express oneself. The fact that travel takes a long time. I mean, there was a time when we traveled by ship for like 40 minutes just to get to a mountain that we saw in the distance. It makes you prepare, it makes you want to fight, it makes you feel. Those exciting moments when everything you've built is on the verge of destruction, juxtaposed with the peaceful evenings, cooking, crafting, and laughing with friends. We ended up building a huge castle on that mountainside, and we decided to use that fortress to fight the 4th boss in the game, a large ice dragon called Motor. And so we decided, why summon 1 boss if you can summon 3 bosses? So we fought 3 dragons at the same time. And to make a long story short, that castle we built got completely destroyed. And you know, we didn't lose everything, but we had to go back and build ourselves back up. And then after getting even better gear than we had before and preparing even more, we came back and, well, we showed those dragons what was up. And we reclaimed our castle ruins at that point, and we built an even bigger and more extravagant castle, which now it has on the wall 3 dragon heads, and this castle is now known as Dragonhold Keep. So that is a story, you know, and it's these stories that happen organically through the gameplay, especially if they're shared moments with your friends, that really like you remember. Like, obviously, I know that Valheim is a Viking game and all that, but what's really important is the things that happen in the game along the journey. They say life is about the journey, and Valheim, being one of the most realistic games ever made, is also about the journey. So I hope I was able to express the importance of the player's journey over the spoon-fed narrative that they give you, because at least for my case, the player's journey is far more important.